What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if the Quarry is better or worse than Until Dawn. So this was always going to happen, right? Probably. It's a spiritual successor to Until Dawn. Supermassive has been on a tear ever since Until Dawn release, doing the Dark Pictures anthology, right? We've had 3 up to this point. We're getting the 4th one, The Devil in Me, later this year, which I'm really excited for. So, when the Quarry gets announced, I get immediately excited, right? They pitch it basically as this is about as close to Until Dawn as you're gonna get. This is the spiritual successor to Until Dawn. So, is it better than Until Dawn or worse than Until Dawn? I'll give you the answer right away. I'm gonna say it's not as good. I'm gonna say I prefer Until Dawn. I was trying to think of a way of doing this almost as a ranking, because I do think the Quarry deserves some props, and I'm gonna talk about them in this video, and almost in like a ranking-like fashion. I still, to this day, put Until Dawn at the top of any supermassive game. Now, they've made a lot of games over the last like 12, 13 years, but Until Dawn would be at the top. Then when you start going through the Dark Pictures and now the Quarry, the Quarry is definitely up and down. I talked about it in my review. The strengths of the Quarry are incredibly good. The top characters in the Quarry, Laura, even like David Arquette, right, as Chris, there are some really tremendous characters in the Quarry that I would say rival the best they've ever done. I'd put it right up there with like a Hayden Panettiere in Until Dawn, right? I really would put it top tier. So there are some incredible characters that make a mark. I think the angle the Quarry went, without getting into spoilers of let's just say, I guess, what's going on in the Quarry, right? I think it doesn't rival Until Dawn, but it's definitely kind of special. And again, that's where you start to say, all right, well, does it become better than the Dark Picture games? I think so. I think at least the first 2. House of Ashes has a soft spot in my heart because it actually is a pretty darn good game. But I would say, I think thinking about it right now, I would probably put the Quarry above it. I think I enjoyed it a little bit more. I think, again, the thing with the Quarry is the strengths of it are very strong, and they're stronger than the strengths of a lot of the other games. There are weaknesses, right? We've talked about the weaknesses. The cast, the more I think about it, I think is very top-heavy. There are some characters like Ryan, we've talked about how I just flat out don't like. Jacob is fine, but he really just like gets left to the wayside eventually as the game goes on. A character like Emma, now I really like Emma, but I've seen people talk about her online. I think it's a love or hate thing. I think you're either gonna really love she reminds me of characters in Until Dawn where like she's playing a specific role, right? And if you don't like that, you're going to end up like hating her. But if you just kind of embrace, all right, she's trying to almost like a trope, right? She's being a trope character, then maybe you like her. So I can see that. But this game has that. It has I think some really weak characters, or characters that just get underdeveloped as the game goes on. And that, I think, hurts it overall, right? The ending is a little weak, I would say. It kind of ends very abruptly. The ending itself, actually, I think is pretty darn good. And really, from chapters like 5 or 6 on, the game hits a new level. I think it's a slow burn. There's some good in chapters like 1 through 4, but then it really starts to pick up as the game goes on, which I think is a strength. It's a really, really good strength. Again, though, if we're comparing it to Until Dawn, I got to bring up Until Dawn. Until Dawn is just one of those things that will always stand out in my head in terms of just how good that game was. I really will not back down on how amazing it is. Now, one thing I see people bring up, and I do think is valid, and I want to talk about it, is the choices. So naturally, and I do agree with this, naturally as these games have gone on, they have become more sophisticated, let's call it, right? In terms of, making a decision here is going to affect something down the road. Until Dawn has it, but Until Dawn, again, as people have pointed out, it is weaker. It is just naturally weaker, that the decisions, they're more like just cut and dry, where it's like either this thing happens or this thing happens, and when things happen in Until Dawn, they really only happen because of a very few select things you've done previously. Whereas as these games have evolved and as I guess they've learned, right, and tried to build them up, it's more of a cascading effect, right? Things, decisions you make that maybe you think don't mean anything, they may come back to haunt you. Whereas Until Dawn didn't have that. Now, again, the whole reason, I guess, why I would say that, I understand, and I agree that these games have gotten better to an extent. A thing I still will hold true, though, with Until Dawn is I don't think, well, I've always used the expression, like, bigger isn't always better. And normally we say that with, like, open world games. I would say it here in some ways. And again, by the way, these are all just my opinions. In some ways, Until Dawn, I kind of like the simplicity. I kind of like the fact that it's not I mean, there are decisions you make. There's, again, not as many, and not as many things are going to kind of come back at you or whatever. But I feel like that's almost a strength of that game, where it is kind of limited, and maybe it's like a product of the time, right? It's just how it was. I think visually, I mean, obviously this game looks better, but I mean, the visuals haven't really taken gigantic steps, let's say, from Until Dawn. Now, I saved this kind of for the end. One major reason I would say, okay, Until Dawn is a better game, is the mystery and all that stuff surrounding it. So if you would allow, let me go into spoiler territory. We're going to spoil at least the what's going on in the Quarry, all right? Maybe I won't spoil everything, but I'm going to spoil at least that. I like it. I like the werewolf angle. I like the mystery kind of surround, especially in the beginning, right? Because there's hunters, and you got no idea, like, whose side is anybody on, right? You really don't know. All right, cool. One thing, though, and this is a big, big thing. I really prefer the angle Until Dawn went. And again, that's not like they did that, so you really can't replicate what you've already done, so you have to try something different. I like the werewolves. I actually think the werewolf feature and how they did it with, like, their skin bursting or whatever, like, I think it's actually really cool, and I like the angle they played it. I've said it before, one thing that I do think holds it back is the fact that we as players learn what's going on in the Quarry most times, I would argue, before the player, like the characters, all right? So when the characters are talking, they don't seem all that smart because they're not really picking up on certain things that we as the players have. Does that make sense? So I think that kind of hurts it, and I think the game is pretty predictable. I just think it is, even with a character like Laura. Now, again, I went on record. Laura is my favorite character in this game. She's probably tied for first in terms of the best characters Supermassive has ever. I'm willing to go that far. She's an incredible character. The issue is that even that is kind of predictable. She's on the box cover. She's the biggest face. She's like the main face. So for her to be in the first 30 minutes and never come back, even though you know she kind of gets knocked out, right? It's like, well, you know she'll return. So when she does return, it's like, oh, sweet, you're back, but it's not too surprising. Does that make sense? So even that, and I just think the game is kind of predictable, where you can tell werewolves, where you can tell it's Chris, right? Chris is kind of like, why did he leave? Why was he so upset? Like, you can kind of piece it together. And this is, again, just my opinion. Until Dawn, I think flat out is harder to read. Because Until Dawn is basically two different things at the same time, right? It's a slasher, it's a teen slasher movie as a game, and then it becomes supernatural with Wendigos. And again, I just think product of the time. We didn't really know what to expect, right? You see the trailers with Until Dawn, and it mainly focuses on the slasher, right? The guy in the in the mask, and it's like, okay, well, who is he? Is he one of them? Is it just a slasher thing? And then as the game goes on, it's like, whoa, no, wait, other things are happening in this game that's a little. Now they do the same thing here in the Quarry, right? Because you don't know about the hunters. There's the woman ghost, right? So there's like supernatural even outside of werewolves. They try similar things because Until Dawn did that, right? There's kind of like supernatural ghosty things, but then there's also Wendigos. Like, they try a bunch of different things, but I just think you can never fully replicate that. And they kind of want to, like, they want to stick relatively close to the formula that worked the first, but you can't do it exactly the same, right? That's natural. And that's understandable, I guess, right? So I would say that is a really big thing to me that holds this game back. I'm not necessarily saying werewolves in the way they did it is less enticing than Wendigos in Until Dawn. Like, I'm not necessarily. I do think I prefer that, and I guess I would prefer like the teen slasher kind of thing over being hunted by hunters in the beginning of the core. Like, I guess I'd prefer the things of Until Dawn, but I would say it's a little bit more specific. It's how they did it, how they kind of blended it together, where it's kind of one thing and it goes directly into another, but there's those elements throughout the entire thing. I think they just pulled it off better there. And then again, the other big thing is the cast. Even in my review, I did say I like the cast, and I do. Laura, Max is a great character. Caitlin is a really great character. I think Abigail is a great. I mean, you can list off several of them, but I think as you go through, it starts to get a little weak. Some characters, like the family, basically the Hackett family, some of them are like, they're cool, but they're in it for like 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then depending on the choices you make, right? Depending on the choices you make. So I just think I prefer the cast overall, because there are, again, in my opinion, some extremely weak characters in the Quarry. Ryan is one of the worst characters they've ever created. Jacob is fine, but he can be very annoying. And literally, I feel like they kind of were like, all right, we've had enough. Like, we don't really need him in our game, so we're gonna have him be locked up. But for most of the game, he's literally just not gonna be in it. And again, you have like a character like Emma, who I think you could either love or hate. Much the same as maybe a certain character, let's say in Until Dawn, right? So I get it. And again, by the way, this is not me trashing the Quarry. This is not me saying that this game is garbage. I overall said I liked this game, and I said if you're into these kind of games, I think this is probably worth the money. Okay, I said that in the review. I want to make that clear. I am comparing it in this video to one of my favorite games of all time, one of my favorite horror games of all time, the thing that put Supermassive on the map. And I think it's okay to compare it because they kind of set themselves up to do that. For me, I don't think it matches up. But I do think it beats at least Man of Medan and Little Hope. I would easily say it's better than those two. House of Ashes, I would lean, yes, it's better than that right now. But yeah, it catch me on a different day. Maybe I change my mind, but that's okay. That's okay because I still would say they're in an upwards direction. You know, the days of Supermassive being like, ooh, I'm really not sure. Maybe they were a one-hit wonder with Until Dawn and they just couldn't do it anymore. That was a real thing. I at least was saying around Man of Medan, Little Hope time. Not anymore. They're clearly on an upwards. They're trying to get back, I think, to what made it special, and they're doing a good job. And in some ways, they're doing a better job, again, with choices and how those decisions impact the game. They're doing better than ever. But in other things, they're still a little iffy that they need to, kind of catch up. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on so you know when all these videos go up. And I hope to see you all on the next video.